progress. There's so much to it. And so I'm hoping that rather than approve it next week, we can review it and the council can authorize me to continue developing it. So, hi, Jennifer. Are you waving or stretching?
Trying to turn my lights back on. They keep going off. There we go. Sorry.
Nothing like not being acknowledged by an inanimate object to like
All
remind
the
you what you're,
time. All
yeah.
the time. Like the paper towel dispensers and the sinks. I'm always like, I'm just not a human. I'm not a
I
human.
know, validate me, please. Yeah. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share the document that we've got. Hi, Kelly. I was saying that I hadn't gotten as much done as I had hoped, but I will show you what I have. And it's including the comments that Adea has made with some suggestions. So I'm going to go up to page 13, which is the first one. Oops, too far. Here we go. Okay. Adea recommended another article that just talked about some of the ways that people can, or some of the ways that researchers have found to increase response rate. So I appreciate that. That was a great article, and I added a few things there. So that's a change. So explaining the purpose of the survey to students so they understand why, and then appealing to altruism, and I phrase that as desire to help other students, and then assurance that their response matters. Those were the three things that this other study, this Sid Nair study, found really were helpful in improving online responses. That's a really interesting article, Adea, and I want to go through it more because they're talking about the difference in generational responses, that what they call Generation Y are less likely to respond to a survey unless there's something in it for them than earlier generations, which I thought was interesting. It just that actually just may be age based too. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Younger people may be less likely to do something for an altruistic measure. And then down here, okay, so calculating response rate and representativeness. Adea made some really good comments. I was calling it start rate and response rate, and Adea's like, that's really not the language that's frequently used. So gave me some other suggestions there. So I used response rate and completer rate. I also wanted to show you what the AAU survey, I'm going to share that screen real quick. So this is just information on what do we want to count as a response rate, right? And I feel like counting the number of students who started the survey is really important, but it's also equally important to count the number of students who actually completed and then submitted the survey. So because those could be really two different things. The number of students who started the survey could be might be due primarily to what the school had done in preparation for the survey. So those are, I feel like the people who start the survey, that's something that the school might have some control over, how many students start it. That there might be things that they could do to encourage students. Students who submit it, I feel like that's the survey's problem, not the schools. I feel like the students who went all the way through the survey and then were like, yeah, I don't really want to share this information with the school. That's a different kind of reaction than folks who choose to start it or not. And I want to show you what the AAU, the Association of American Association of University Women's Study, chose to do, or how they explained it. Okay. So they had in their results by individual status code, they talk about their definition of a completed survey, and I really kind of like this. I think it's a little bit cleaner. They define a completed, they say, this is what we define as a completed survey. And then this is how we talk about it. I don't know that we need to get as complex as they are. But I thought they did a pretty good job of um, kind of I really like the idea that they explained it up front and then said this is what we consider to be someone the response rate. They
What is
also, yeah,
what is
sorry.
N1 and I'm sorry, what is N1 and N2? I'm trying to see because I haven't
Yeah.
seen this formula before. Because as you see, when I was giving you all those references, everybody defined it different ways. So yeah,
Yeah.
so okay, what is the N1 and N2?
So N1 represents the number of students who started the survey, completed the victimization sections, but did not submit the survey.
Mm-hmm.
N2 represents the number of students who started the survey and submitted it. And then
Oh,
N
number
is
of students
the
started
large
one.
N. Yeah, large N is their total population.
Okay. So I guess these are the people who started the survey, I guess got all the way down to where you submit, but did not submit it. So they basically complete the survey, but did not hit submit, right? I guess the victimization section. So you included those who completed, pretty much completed the survey, but just did not hit submit, which is fine because you're not missing any answers. Okay.
Well, actually, if they don't hit submit, we're not going to allow them to use that data
Okay,
because,
but you're going to still put that in your response rate.
right, yeah, we'll count, yeah, yeah. This number of students actually tried to do the survey. This number of students actually did this, completed it, and then said, yes, I consent to having my data used in the aggregate results.
Okay. I'm trying to
Because
see how we would get that in one. I guess when we get down the question about consent or not consent. So for the ones that says I do not consent, that meant they probably completed it and there's a N for that number. Because otherwise you would have to go through the whole survey. Okay, go ahead. Because I'm just thinking of the back end, how I would
Apologies.
get the N1.
Yeah, my apologies for interrupting. As I understand that, I think N1 refers to the number of people that responded to the status 6 question, or that's not a question, but the number of people in status 6, and then N2 is the number of people in status 7. So it's not, that's not clearly written, but just that's the implication I took from that.
yeah,
Okay, I can't see that. Let me see my
yeah,
thing.
sorry.
Who
I,
started the
I
survey, completed. Yeah, I saw that. I mean, but do we have a victimization section is pretty much the whole survey, right? Or is it a particular section
I
of our
guess,
survey?
yeah, I guess I'm not saying let's not break it down. I don't want to break it down into all of these different statuses like they did. I think that's too complex for our purposes. They were really interested in, how far did students get through the survey? I think what we want to know is, did they start the survey and did they submit the survey? So not even how far down the survey did they get, but did they open it up? Did they start to, did they start to answer the questions? Is there some kind of a partial data set that shows that they attempted to answer the questions? And that would be the response rate. And then there would be those who submitted the survey, and we would refer to them as the completers because they went through all the questions. And the last question is, now that you've answered all those questions, do you want this information shared? Do you want us to count this? We want to give them that last option to consent to their data being used because we can't really ask them for their consent before they've seen the questions. So we would just, our N1 would be students who started the survey but didn't complete it. And then our N2 would be students who submitted the survey.
So what I'm hearing from this as well, just so I'm not confused, so we need a way to track, I guess, how many students click on that link to initially answer the survey.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Rain. Okay, does that make sense to folks, Kelly and Adea?
I suggested about, remember I looked at the different various ways of defining things, and then I suggested 4 type of things you could collect, or 3. And I thought they were a little bit more intuitive, but I don't know. Um, it's up to you. And also the numbers are turned around,
So
200 over 1,000.
Right. Thank you.
I mean, and there's no
Look
right or
at what
wrong to
I
this, right?
look
But
at
from my
look
point of view,
at Kelly,
go
look
ahead.
at what
Go
I
ahead, Elaine.
said. Can you read what I kind of said down here at the bottom of my response? I don't know. I can't move the thing. Okay. I kind of suggested a response rate and then gave an example. I think the response rate is what did I say the response rate should be? Was 300 started. So obviously, so the response rate would be started over the number of people who were sent it. So 30%. The completion rate was the completion rate, the way it was defined originally, the completion rate was the people who, out of the people who started, how many completed. So that was based on the definition here. And then I also said something about a partial completion rate or something like that. I can't see it right now, but it's up to you. Whatever is easiest. I just want whatever we decide to be intuitive. I don't know if that formula is intuitive enough for me, but go ahead, Kelly. I'm gonna defer to you on this.
No. Reading your comment there, I think I agree with what's in the comment. I'd be curious, like what's the utility of a completion rate defined in this way? I mean, it would
Yeah, I
effectively
don't like
tell
it,
us
but
how many people got into it, but then didn't want us. Well, it wouldn't tell us this
complete.
directly. It would tell us how many people engaged with the survey, but the one that we actually care about is how many submitted it.
Yeah.
So I think that to Adea's point in that comment there, I think what we're trying to do here is make sure that we have a definition that is clear as possible so that everybody is using, we hope, the same definition of response rate so that when we look across school to school to school, we can tell, I mean, not this wouldn't necessarily be published, but I think the only place in which this is useful is if we can compare one another. If we see one schools have a low rate, another school has a high rate, what's the difference between how they approach it, things like that. So, Rowan, I'm curious, what's the as it's labeled here in your draft, what's the purpose of the response, or sorry, not the response rate, that's crossed out, the completer rate, which is, how many people get to the end, but maybe don't necessarily submit it? Because the one that we would calculate all of any quantitation on would be the submitted rate, wouldn't we?
Right. So yes, so we would calculate, that should be a response. We would calculate, so the two things. One is the response rate is the school does all this work to try to get students to complete the survey, and X number of students actually open up the survey, take a look at it, and start to respond to the questions. Okay. So I feel like we should give the schools credit for that. Like they did, if a school manages to get a 30% response rate, 30% of the students that opened the survey and started to complete it, I think they should get credit for that. I think it's also important for, and then the completer rate, the completed surveys, those are the only ones that'll be used in data analysis.
Right.
The reason that I think it's important to have the two different ones, one is so the schools get credit for the work they did to increase their response rate, but two, when we come back to the survey and we start to create the second version, which will be, they get in 2 years, right? Because we're going to be editing this based on we'll be editing this the next time, right? If we find that 30% of students are on average, 30% of students start the survey, but only 10% actually submit it, that would give us an opportunity to do some qualitative analysis. Why are only 10% of the students completing it? It's too long, it's too intense. They're, you know, the online platform was too cumbersome, right? There might be a lot of different reasons. We can improve the survey by understanding why students didn't submit it when they started it.
I wish and I can see that. That's why I didn't change the definition. I actually want to see the percentage, also the percentage of those who completed out of the total number of those enrolled or sent the email. So like, I think that's 200 over 1,000 based on that. I kind of wanted to see that, but if uh, I don't know whether that would be the submission rate or something like that, or because some people also deem that as the response rate. So we have like several different definitions. So I can see where the completer one would be important, kind of kept your definition there. But I do think I kind of want to see what percentage of the actual people who were emailed that actually completed it.
Right, and that would
That
be the completer rate, right? Because their N is the entire student population. Like they have to offer the survey to all of the students that are
okay, you did
enrolled.
that. Okay, I think then the one that I thought you were talking about was the 200 over 300, which was the percentage of, I guess, I don't know whether I found it somewhere or whether it was in the survey originally, but it was the percentage of the people who started, how many actually completed. So it's that 66.7%. So we're not going to go with that to see what's going on with the survey. You have all these people opening it up, but they're not actually going and completing. So we're not going to actually ask for that number. We're just going to ask for those who actually completed the survey and those who started it.
We could ask for that comparison. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say the same thing of like the good thing about asking for the starting rate and the completion rate is that we can also calculate that ourselves depending.
Yeah, I guess. And maybe we can ask for some ends too. Because if we
Well,
ask for the ends, we can get it ourselves.
yeah. I appreciate both sides of this. We can, but I think we want it to be as clear as possible. I'm just coming back
Yeah.
to this idea so that every school is doing it
Yeah.
the same way. So first of all, I want to endorse the language that Adea is using here. I mean, simply that it is the denominator is the number of people invited.
Right.
That should be exactly the same
Yeah.
as the overall enrollment, but you just never know. So technically,
Yeah.
it should be the number of invited. The other thing is that technically, and forgive me for falling into professor and lecture mode here, but all what Adea is saying, I can also agree with, which is the first one is the only correct rate there. That is the response rate. The completion rate, in order to be an actual rate, should be calculated the way that Adea is suggesting it, which is out of all those who started, how many finished, and then a submission rate would be the same thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with us telling people to do it the way that Rowan has it drafted here, and I actually think that's the logical thing. I'd be in favor of actually changing the word rate there to something else. So like, completion fraction and submission fraction, because the only one that is technically a rate there is the first one, unless we write the definitions the way Adea is suggesting that we write them. Because you can't, the rate of completion can't be divided by, and this is Adea's point, you can't be divided by all those invited, because anybody who never started should not be in that denominator. You can't complete it if you didn't start it, right? It sort of annuls that. I'm being hyper technical here. I do think that what we want is what you have there in content, Rowan. I guess I'm just sort of throwing a curveball here and saying for the completer rate and the submission rate, let's call those the completion fraction and the submission fraction, because that's technically what they are. Sorry.
So
Adea, you agree? I'm simply advancing your argument. I want everybody to recognize that Adea is the one that deserves credit here. I'm just endorsing that observation, I think, is the right one.
All right.
Adea, you're on mute if you're talking.
Or Jessica.
Oh, I was talking. I was saying I agree with you, but this is based on research. Technically, you can make these numbers up. Just be consistent, and I mean, make up what you want, but just be consistent and define things. I just want it to be as intuitive as possible. Whatever you do, just make it be intuitive as possible. Um, and technically, you could just ask for two things and ask for the ends and calculate it yourself instead of having them calculate it all. So if you ask for the ends and things like that, um, then you can do all that yourself on the back end.
Yeah, I'm gonna second that for ease of calculation and for sake of consistency. I think it would just be best to have them submit like, okay, here's how many students responded, here's how many students we sent it to, here's how many students completed. So then we're not having to reckon with folks trying to calculate their own rates or doing it wrong or whatever. And we can just like put it into a spreadsheet or a calculator that'll take 2 seconds to figure it out.
So just a reminder that whatever their summary report is their summary report. And that's what gets mounted on our webpage and on their webpage. So if you felt that it would be valuable information, if you're a prospective student, for example, you're considering going to U of O and you want to know what their, you want to know, okay, you said that you had that 17% of your students experienced sexual harassment in the class, from a teacher. How many students was that? Right? So both of those things I think are really important to know. We can provide them with tables that have those calculations in them. So they could just enter the N and then it would calculate itself. But I think what the schools are worried about is that we're going to say, oh, U of O had 200 sexual assaults and Willamette University only had 30. Right? So therefore, U of O is a more dangerous place to go. Okay, thank you, Adea, right? Like we get that intuitively, but if someone, and honestly, I think we should not rely on people who are looking at the results from the survey having a basic science background or any kind of, or the ability to interpret things. I think it's better if we can have them show percentages and numbers. The numbers keep them honest, right? If they say 17% and we look at their numbers and we go, wait a minute, that looks more like 40%, right? Then the numbers keep them honest. The percentage gives you something that is relevant to that particular student population. So it's basically we're asking them to show their work. But I agree that it should be as simple and as clear as possible. And I think I made a total dog's mess of that. So I really, really appreciate this. What I would like to do is have the opportunity to go through and clean it up, make it look a little bit more presentable, and then just send that particular section out to you and have each of you individually, if you have any comments, comment back to me so that we're not making decisions out of this meeting. And then I'll bring that up at the next Monday's meeting. Would that be okay with folks? Okay, that way too, I can check. You can just give me a reality check on that. Sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say you're being way too hard on yourself. I think you had this just right. We're just debating on which the final form is. That's all.
Thank you.
I don't think it was a mess at all.
Yeah.
I
think I had the numbers all backwards. Yeah, Adea was right.
It's all good. What Adea has in the comment is a different form of thinking about it, and it makes perfect sense to me. So, but I think what we are all agreeing on is that the way you have it, which is just nice and simple, and there'll be a bunch of survey and stats professors out there who will say, well, you're not quite using these labels right, but that's okay. We say, well, but we're telling you how to calculate it. So do it that way and call it that. It's all fine. It's good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And the law talks about maximizing response rate. So we do want to use in there, response by, Yeah. How are we defining response rate? And I think response rate is how many people did you get to open up the survey? I feel like that's fair to the colleges.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Um,
And that also just means that that implementation committee of each specific college, that's another task on their list, right? To sort of find a way of tracking how many students begin to interact with the survey.
They should be able to get that information just by looking at the numbers in SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics. It'll show them that, and then the N2, the number of submitters, will be the number of people who they can filter the responses by the number of people who responded yes to the submission question. And then that filtered set will be the ones that they base their calculations on.
Gotcha.
Okay. The other thing I'm
Oh.
going to ask, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if we stay with this, which is fine, just too simple and just okay with the names, however we want it, and we explain it. I do like, I don't see the name, I think Rain, idea of maybe putting a template inside this word, and then they could put their in, and they'll be automatic. They'll put their in all the 4 quadrants, and then there's a third column that automatically produce the based on what they put in the other 2 columns automatically. I don't know if we can do that in Word. I know we can do it in Excel, but it automatically calculates that percentage for them. And therefore we get those in numbers, because I would like to the number of people who completed, the number of people enrolled. They can do the percentage, but I would like those ends and the number of people it was sent to. I think those ends are very important. And like you said, it keeps them honest. It just, we can't, yes, we know we just can't assume they're going to do the statistics right, but it'll just keep them honest, like you said.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. One of the things that I will also be working on this summer is developing a report format. Bell had started one before they left, but I want to give them and I think it will probably be a spreadsheet. I'm not really good at formatting spreadsheets, but I'll try and figure it out. But an Excel file so that they can just plug in their numbers, and then this is what your report should look like. This is what we, here, this is the template. These, plug this number from this line into this socket here, and then everybody will be doing the same. The reports will all look the same, and they can add all the context that they want, right? They can add to the narrative section anything they want, but we want their tables to look the same, to be based on the same data. That'll make it a lot easier for the schools too, I think. Oh boy. Okay. I was just thinking that's another project. It's okay. It's a long summer. We got lots of time. So, okay. So I will go ahead and I will make it clear what we're talking about, make it more clear what we're talking about, explain why we want both of these numbers, explain the terms that we're using, maybe make an acknowledgement for the researchers out there that these are not necessarily the terms that researchers would use, but we feel that these are the easiest for most folks to understand.
And if you need help with that template, I can help you.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, thank you. That's great. Yeah. Okay. Okay, and then I think, was there anything else? I think that was, I had just put a little bit more down in here in the cell size. I think Adea, you had made a comment here, and I think I tried to respond to that by just changing the language there. So it says, before sharing or publishing results, you need to aggregate the data, but aggregation isn't sufficient to prevent potential identification in these cases options. So I just tried to explain that a little bit better. Okay, thank you. And then there was one more place where I wasn't sure what you meant by spacing on this one. Do you remember?
I think there was an extra space after publishing or something like that,
Okay.
wherever, because I didn't want to change the
Yeah, you're
document
right.
without you knowing what was going on
Got
or
it.
something like that. Okay,
Got it.
you got it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, you're right. Okay. Okay. All right. And that right now is all the changes. The only other thing that I've started working on, and I will continue to work on the coding table, but then I'm adding the optional questions back in here. So they've got customizing the survey questions, and then this section is going to be like approved optional questions. These were ones that we didn't have very many of these, but we did have a few, and I wanted to make those available to the schools. So again, those were the questions about what year are you? That doesn't necessarily apply to all schools. Some schools might want to know about, how you take your classes, and then some schools might also want to know what the person's educational goals were. That was the only other thing I added. Okay. All right. And I think there's a couple of others in there too. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Right. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this? I really appreciate everyone's patience with all this. Hey, Rain.
Hey, sorry. This is also might be because this is my first implementation meeting. I'm a little bit new. But I was wondering, I was like rereading the draft and was wondering about the section titled Introduction Background of Oregon's Sexual Misconduct Survey. It seems to be just sort of an intro to the next section that will be coming along. I was wondering sort of what the background and purpose behind that section was. It seemed a little bit just to sort of repeat something that was going to be repeated again.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share. And if you can tell me, I'll kind of scroll down here. So we've got the executive summary.
Mm-hmm.
And then
it's, I believe, above that. Maybe it was an older draft, but I think it was the most recent draft.
Okay. So the first thing after the table of contents is the executive summary.
Mm-hmm.
And that does have some of the background in here. So recognizing the importance, and this is what the survey is about.
Yeah, I believe there was a section after that one.
Okay.
This one, I believe.
Okay.
I'm wondering just what the purpose of that was, or how you view it in relation to the rest of the document.
Right. I think just to kind of summarize what those were for, it doesn't need to be in here. But I put the recommendation, I said, the recommendations are divided into sections, and then this probably could use some work, honestly, looking at it right now. But I think the idea was that most people are not going to read. If somebody reads the executive summary, they may not read the rest of the document. They may only be looking at that and then looking for something specific within the document. So I think that's why I put that in there. But I can certainly take it out if people feel like it's redundant and not helpful.
I think my main question was if there was a way to sort of add a sentence about the purpose of this section, if that would be viable, or I'm wondering what people think about that as an option, just because I know I read it and was like, huh, is this the entire document right here? I'm wondering if, just for accessibility reasons, that might be helpful to clarify.
Okay. You mean explain why there's an executive summary?
Or why that little section, sort of chunking it into parts exists, and sort of like what that purpose, below is a breakdown of the different sections in this document. I know that was my thought as someone who is neurodivergent and read it, just sort of was trying to piece together where this goes in the structure of the document, but definitely not something we have to do. It was just something I wanted to pose about like the experience of reading it.
Could we
go ahead?
I was gonna say, could we clarify that by like labeling it as like a table of contents, or in like adding in page numbers and hyperlinks, so then it's like really clear that like these are the different sections, here's a tiny summary of what you'll find in each section, but this makes it easily navigable if you're just wanting to, you know, go back and remember, oh, what did they say in section 3 about handling and protecting data, and I want to click there. So that could maybe, yeah.
Okay, so something like
Yeah, that would be perfect.
okay. Right. If it's printed out, the hyperlink won't work. So I'm not, I mean, I think I can put this in, but I'm just going to make myself a note to go through and make sure this still is.
When we format it, we can just reference the page numbers at that time for each section on this part.
Oh, really good point. Yeah.
So you're referencing, you're going to hyperlink to the section.
Yeah, we'll hyperlink to the section, and then as Kevin said, we can also just put the page number in. Okay, once it's formatted. Okay. All right. Okay. And then, yeah, and then we get into, yeah. And then this is a draft outline, but this is actually going to become, this is now the table of contents. So change that. And these all have hyperlinks, but we'll also have page numbers there. Okay. Great. Thank you, Rain. It's really, really helpful to have somebody who hasn't been staring at this for months to take a look at it, I think.
All good, and definitely not necessary to keep if it's sort of discussed and decided not to keep it. Just
it's helpful. Thank you. Okay. Well, if you do have any other questions or comments and you want to share them with me, please feel free to email me. And and again, if I think we've agreed that, well, I don't know, I'm hoping that you'll review it rather than approve it next Monday, and then I'll be authorized to continue working on it this summer. And I will keep updating the Basecamp. So when we come back to meet in August, you should see something that's a lot more complete. Kevin's going to be working on the formatting. It's going to be much prettier. So. All right. And Kevin, I don't think I'm going to ask you to try to format it before next Monday. I don't think that's fair. So if you want to start and maybe show us what it might look like when it's actually completed, that would be lovely. But
well, it sounds like it's still very much a work in progress. So yeah, maybe wait off until it gets more finalized.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Okay, all right. Well, thank you folks so much for being here this morning, for doing all this work. Yeah, and happy Juneteenth to everyone. Yeah.